Good morning and welcome to Evolving with Soul. I am Josette Diaz and I am a self awareness coach for women in midlife. And we are the ladies who have been operating in a noisy world of endless to do lists, expectations, and the occasional curveball while placing ourselves last on that list. I know many of you can relate to this. And this is in part why I created the Art of Awareness, which is a community membership for women to gather and to witness one another as they rise on that list within. And so, if you're interested in learning about yourself, revealing what's sitting in your subconscious, and start building a relationship by having soul conversations with yourself, then you may want to check out the Art of Awareness and come and join us. It's a beautiful group of women. And I have the lovely Vasi Huntalas with me today. And Vasi is the founder of Ignite Your Soul, which is a breakthrough mindset mentor and professional intuitive. Excuse me for messing that up. Guiding visionary leaders through the inner shifts that create real world momentum fast. So, using a powerful mix of intuitive insight and subconscious clearing, she reconnects you with the truest version of yourself so you can make the big impact you're here to make. So, we are going to be having a wonderful conversation. Good morning, Vasi. How are you today?
Morning. I'm great. I'm looking forward to this topic, digging in with you.
I know, me too. So just to let the audience in on what we're going to be talking about today we're addressing the hidden patterns in relationships and self-identity. And when we speak of the word identity, I just kind of want to clarify the meaning that I have behind this because it's developed into something where it started off as identity the way most people think of it. That's just how we think of ourselves. And it's developed into the masks that we put on. So the word identity is the way that we've identified ourselves in order to survive in the world, move in the world, and do all the things just right and meet the expectations. And so I know that, Vasi, you have a different point of view about identity, and I would love for you to share that because I think it's a good thing to open up with giving people an example or understanding of what is even a broader, more expansive version of identity.
Well, I love what you said about the masks that we put on around identity. I think that's a great jumping off point because in our lifetimes we take on certain roles. That's another word for identity in
Mhm.
my understanding and my experience. Roles and assumptions and expectations of who we are, how we should behave, and so those identities are, in a sense, clothes. That's another way to think of it that we put on, and we think it's us. It's who we really are, and it's not. It's just who we think we should be or who we've had to be from
Yeah.
conditioning and programming. And so identities also dictate who we are in relationship to others, because an identity is something we think that comes with certain behaviors, certain and it's even like nuances too,
Mm.
like certain ways of being in the world and doing certain things.
Yeah.
And so identity is something that can change from situation to situation. We might be a people pleaser in one situation and a badass boss or something in another. It can look really different
Yeah, that's
depending
true.
on the context of the situation. Who do
Mhm.
we think we need to be and how do we show up based on those expectations and programs that are running at a
Mhm.
subconscious level even.
Yeah,
So,
that's so true.
yeah, right? So
Yeah.
identities can be different from this context, from situation to situation. And the other thing that I'm getting to say about identities is that they are not necessarily something we choose
Mm. Mm.
because of the
Say that a little
subconscious
more.
aspect. Yeah,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. I totally agree with that because, I mean, I just had a workshop with my, Art of Awareness group, and each quarter, I do a larger, broader 2 to 3 hour workshop. And so we were working on parenting our inner child in Dear Little Me, honoring the age within. And in that, we really honed in on the fact that there are all these expectations that are placed on us as children and how we develop different aspects of ourselves, identities, to deal with that structure that we, grow up in. And so that can look like being the rebellious child. It can look like being the child who is cooperative all the time, even though inside they're like bursting. That was kind of me. I think that I was always the people pleaser, and yet inside I could feel like I wasn't allowed to be angry. So anger just kind of festered, and I had to learn how to process that and actually allow myself to be myself and let go of holding on to how I felt, and that it's okay to express yourself in appropriate ways. You can still do that diplomatically. Anywho, so I think that you've hit the nail on the head with really honing in on the fact that identity has more to do with the expectations that have been placed in our belief systems, in our framework of the way that we survive in the world. So I think we're going to dive in a little bit deeper on that, and let's start off with our first question, which is, in what ways do we confuse who we truly are? I love how this just rolls right in. I mean, I wasn't thinking of the question when we were talking about this.
Right.
So, in what ways do we confuse who we truly are with who we've learned to be in order to feel accepted or safe in relationships?
Yeah.
And that's
Well,
all relationships, right? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
exactly. Yeah. It's all relationships. And, that question is there's so many levels to it. So I'm going to start with the level of we confuse ourselves with really understanding who we are.
Mhm.
And so when we don't have permission, like early on or
Yeah.
even later, to discover who we are, like we're given a label, for example, or a role, or we see other people doing these things, it's very confusing because if that doesn't match up with how we actually feel or what we're being told on an inner level is right for us, it sets up this, I want to say, playing smaller than we are,
Mhm.
like
Mm.
keeping hidden. And visibility is a big deal with the women that I work with
Yeah.
and with women in general, I would say, oftentimes.
Yeah.
So it's almost like we're hiding behind how we think we should be and who we've learned to be to feel accepted. Like,
Mhm.
don't brag too much. Don't
Yeah.
say too much about, um, don't put yourself above someone else. Don't stand out too much. You might be like bragging or you might be seen as prideful or whatever. So there's these messages we get. And, when you look at a child is like really proud of what they've done, like
Mhm.
who they are.
Yeah.
They do a piece of artwork, like, look at this, what I did with my crayons, or, look what I made in the kitchen. Look at this mess that I made. There's a sense of really claiming it. And
Yeah.
I think that's what we get away from. One of the ways
Mhm.
is that we aren't able to claim that expression of ourself that just comes out so effortlessly because we're trying to fit it in the box of the identity or the role or who we've been
Exactly.
told or what's accepted.
I love that. Yeah. I'm sorry, were you gonna say something else about that?
No, that was just one level I wanted to start with.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that that's an important thing to, bring up, because I can relate this to a number of things. And when you're talking about getting small, I love that, because not I don't love getting small, but I love that you brought that up, because um, I've found for myself and for the other women that I work with that they will look at making decisions around something and recognizing there are certain consequences that may not be favorable for others. And if I do this, then this will happen with so and so,
Mhm.
and or it will affect, how something else is going to interact with the decision. And instead of doing what feeds them, they get small and go, "Oh, well, I guess I won't," and they start to back away from the strength of their own decision
Mhm.
because of how it affects everybody else.
Mhm.
And I think that that is such a one of those little, insidious ways that we create ourselves to become smaller and to shrink back from what we really want because we're so concerned about everyone else
Mhm.
and the
Right.
effects of how it's going to hit everyone else. And it's interesting when you were talking about children. Sorry, I had a couple things that I built up that I wanted to talk to you about, is that, in my workshop that I just did around parenting the inner child, um, one of the members had spoken of up until she was 5, had all this freedom of expression, running around, playing, coloring, da 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 da. She got into kindergarten and she was coloring, and the teacher said to her in a harsh manner, at least to a 5-year-old, it felt harsh. Who knows
Mhm.
how it really was said, right?
Right.
It's all about perception. And said, "You can't, you're coloring outside the lines. You're not doing that right."
Mhm.
And she said in that moment, she felt her whole sense of being, well-being was just kinda shrunk into this like, "Oh, I'm not good enough. I've been doing it wrong." Like, it
Yeah.
sort of burst the childlike bubble that she had been in,
Right.
and that started a different kind of trajectory because it hit her in a powerful way,
Yeah.
which I think a lot of us can relate to.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, creativity, it's unfortunate. I've heard so many of those stories.
Mhm.
They make me so sad because they
Yeah.
really are, I call them creativity wounds
Yeah.
because they're the places where we got shut down,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And from really expressing and finding the joy in
Yeah.
those sorts of activities. And I'm remembering I had a client once and she kept saying, there's something that happens for me. Like, and she had her own business and she was starting to speak, but she said, there's something that happens with my throat.
Oh.
And I just feel
Mm.
like I'm not able to get the words out. And so when I looked at that intuitively, I saw and we were able to reconnect with herself as a young girl when she was singing at school or something. And the teacher said, "Oh my gosh, you sound terrible," or something like that. That's how she remembered it, like, oh. and and she went, "Oh, okay." And so when she was able to go back, and she remembers like loving singing, right?
Mhm.
She didn't care whether she was on note, off note, who's
Right,
to say that it wasn't beautiful,
right.
right? In her own way. So right there was something, that probably spoke more to the teacher's own wounding than actually the reality of this little girl who loved to sing. And so with that, she went back to the joy that she had in using her voice, which now more in adulthood was
Right.
speaking. And she went on to, really do amazing work speaking and inspiring people and educating in groups. And, my sense is that if we go back to our early days, there's this seed of something
Yeah.
that we're meant to bring through, right?
Mhm,
It's part
mhm.
of the impact that we're meant to make in the world.
Yes.
And so I just want to bring that up. It's like, it could be anything. It could be using your voice. It could be your art. It could be anything that we've had to shut down or make smaller, put in a box to feel accepted or safe.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. With
really.
others, right?
Yes, exactly. And then what that does to you on an energetic level and also where you're holding it in your body really can start to take a toll on you, and we don't recognize how we, we can make ourselves sick
Yeah.
by holding on to all of that energy and not allowing it to release and be expressed in some way.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that's really important for us to pay attention to because, you know, we don't want to get sick.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, there's another pattern I'm aware of that happens is comparison,
Hmm.
right? So if we're comparing ourselves to others to fit into an identity or to help others feel safe and accepted or ourselves safe and accepted, right? We're
Yeah.
comparing like, okay, I need to stay within this bandwidth, for example. I can't do anything a little different. So I remember what's coming to me is I remember when I started speaking years ago,
Yes.
and it was all about PowerPoints and having everything scripted and fitting in a time and and to this day there's still lots of speaking that's done that way. But there was something in me that never felt right doing that. And so it was like I had to give myself permission to color outside the lines in a sense, right? When speaking, and to create enough spaciousness in my presentations that I was actually tuning in to the audience intuitively and using words and metaphors and stories that resonated with them.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't plan that in advance. I just had to show up. And so that's the way I used to speak when I was younger in school, when I had to stand up. And I didn't realize that till later. Like that's what felt off to
Interesting.
me.
Okay,
You
that's
know?
very interesting.
Isn't that interesting? And so that's why I'm saying I think if we go back and we think of how we naturally did things before we got put in this box or identity or role or expectations,
Mhm.
we will find that we really knew who we were here to be.
That is true.
Because when we're connected to who we truly are, that's how we make the biggest impact, from that authenticity,
Mhm.
not from conforming to the way that everything's been done. And of
Mhm.
course, that holds true in relationships, which we're talking about today,
Yeah.
right? When you can be yourself, whether it's a relationship with one or whether it's a relationship with many, like we're talking about speaking, or we're talking about in a group that you're
Yeah.
facilitating, for example,
Mhm.
Josette.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, or even if you're in a corporate office, you know, how you work in teams and or how you work with other departments, et cetera, et cetera. I think that that's such an important thing to bring up. It brings to mind, when you were speaking about going back to how you naturally did things. I think that, that is such a beautiful thing to open ourselves up to and to recognize where we may have blocked those pieces of ourselves based on the response we got from doing things naturally. Because I know for other women that I've worked with and also myself that the response wasn't always favorable.
Mhm.
And so then that became a block, and I think this leads right into this next question around what role does silence or avoiding play in the patterns we repeat, and what truth might be hiding beneath that quiet?
Mhm. Mhm.
Because so often we silence ourselves. We just say, "Oh, that's not acceptable, that's not okay." So to be natural feels unnatural.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And silence is such an important thing to bring into the conversation because silence can be so misinterpreted.
Mhm.
So in a relationship, if someone's silent, we can assume that means sometimes people assume that means
Yeah.
they're in agreement. They're
Yeah.
silent because they're
Right.
in agreement,
Yes.
right? However, silence can mean I'm I don't want to rock the boat.
Mhm.
So I'm being silent.
Or I'm respecting that you have a different opinion and I don't care to share mine.
That too, right? So we can see and we can keep going on and on and on, right?
Yes. Yeah.
In different situations that we've
Yeah.
experienced. Silence has meant this, silence has meant that. And that avoidance is like the other side of the coin with silence,
Yes.
right? Because if it's like what you just said, I don't want to say anything.
Yeah.
What I think or feel is different. So I'm going to avoid the conflict or
Exactly.
avoid the um, discomfort,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
of saying something.
Or protect you from calling out your opinion or my opinion being different.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And
there's
some
not. Yeah.
and sometimes the avoidance too is I don't trust myself
Mhm. Mhm.
because either I know how to be silent or I know how to be argumentative. There's nothing in between.
And it doesn't have to be argumentative, right? Depending
No,
on.
no.
And I think that sometimes, we hold ourselves back because we either, 1, know the other person and their reactions, or 2, we don't know.
Yeah.
And so we avoid the unknown, and we do that in so many different scenarios, yet, in communication, that can really, restrict us from having fully engaging relationships.
Yes, and part of those engaging relationships are connection,
Yeah,
right? That's really at the deeper, more authentic relationships. There's a connection with ourselves first, obviously, and there's a connection with the other person.
right.
And I want to speak first to the connection about ourselves with being silence, because that's if that's a pattern. And
Mhm.
there were times I remember that that was a pattern for me to be silent.
Right.
And what was going on for me is, oh, they know better.
Yeah.
So I may be thinking differently, but that person knows better, or they're more knowledgeable, or more aware, or more advanced, or whatever. And so maybe there's something I can learn. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's an
Mhm.
openness. However, I remember once in graduate school, one of the people in the class, he looked at me and he said, one of my classmates, and he said, "What is your opinion? What do you think?" And so I noticed that if I was invited, I was very comfortable giving my opinion.
Right.
But
Right.
it was almost like unless I was invited and given a space, I
Mhm.
I didn't insert myself in the space, right? And so obviously that was in my 20s and that changed as I got older. And I think for women, it's like trusting who we are, that connection with ourselves.
Yeah.
And once we trust that, then we're able to be more authentic and our relationships have a different depth.
Mhm. That's absolutely true. I agree with that. As I think that women do, that scenario of being in graduate school and not inserting your opinion until you were, like, acknowledged and asked to participate, I think is such a thing that women do. We do that all the time in so many different circumstances.
Mhm.
And, I'd like to just kind of, like, you know, also talk about how that avoidance, when we don't allow ourselves to play, we don't allow ourselves to, like, have fun. And it's always like the woman, and, I'm speaking of women in this way because it's something that I see that happens so often with the women that I engage with all the time, that they, have such a, strong sense. It's just innate in many of us to, not we're the ones that are looking out for everyone else around us, and so play is not for us,
Mm, mhm, mhm.
and I think that that can change,
Yeah.
if we allow it to.
Mhm, mhm. Play
Uh,
is so
yeah.
important. Yeah, did was there a specific question
No, not
that you'd like
really.
to explore around that?
No,
Yeah.
not particularly. I
Well,
just thought it
yeah,
was
I'll just
interesting.
add that play is essential, and it's even more important as we grow older because we have a tendency to be more serious, right, and more
Mhm.
focused. And play is that whole aspect of our right brain, of our imagination, of our visionary side. It allows us to explore and experiment with who we are, with different parts of ourselves.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, at least in my lifetime, there's never been a more important reason and time to play than now,
Yes.
right? As we see different systems breaking down, as we see different things in our culture and our societies and our, just in our lives shifting and changing, when we bring in the energy of play, it's an expansive energy and it helps to release. It
Mhm.
helps to release what's on its way out, what we no longer need, Play is also something that brings joy, which is a higher frequency, right?
Yeah.
And so that's important in terms of our breaking patterns. Because sometimes I'll
Mm.
notice, like, when I'm being really playful, like, I completely don't have that angst or that pushing against something. There's like a
Right. Yeah.
flow. Like,
Yeah.
play creates flow for me.
Yes.
And whatever issue or thing I'm working on, as soon as I do play, it kind of shakes things up, right? Shifts the energy, most
That's right.
importantly. Shifts the
Right.
energy, it shifts our frequency, and then that shifts our thoughts and our actions.
Mhm.
So it's
Right.
all one big, ripple effect from the energy of play.
And you're ultimately you're changing your state because that's how your frequency is shifting, because your state is shifting. And so I find that, like, whenever I am processing something or I may feel a little bit, um, down on a particular day or whatever it is, if I get creative and if I just even sit and draw and it doesn't have to be anything. I'm, 1, letting myself have the freedom without expectation, and 2, I'm, uh, allowing myself to be led intuitively, and that opens up a whole different kind of dialogue within, and that inner dialogue then helps me to shift my state,
Mhm.
and that is me rising in my frequency, which then expands even more as the rest of my day goes on. And, you hold that spark that you get once you have opened that door,
Mhm.
whether it's through, drawing or whatever it is, some kind of creative activity or thought or even a poem. You could read poetry or something else that you enjoy, and that can open that doorway as well, and once you step into that doorway, it sticks with you all day long.
Mhm. It
And so
does.
and the more you do that, the more it becomes a practice with you. It then, um, becomes more of a consistent state.
Mhm. Yeah. Just as anything else becomes a practice, it's like
Mhm.
play as a practice,
Yes.
meditation as a practice,
Right.
exercise, eating well as a practice.
Mhm.
So play as a practice has the potential to shift our day-to-day reality.
Yeah.
And I'm getting this image, this might be for someone listening, but it's playing the air guitar in your kitchen.
Well, it's not me.
So it's another way to be creative for someone listening. If you're like,
Oh,
"Yeah, I
that's
don't do
great.
those things, I don't paint, I don't do this, I don't do that." It's like, play the air guitar in your kitchen. Like, just, like, go full out and just have fun playing it. It just feels like that's what someone did as a child. And if you did do it as a child, well, it's about time you do it now.
Right? Yeah. Do it often.
Yeah. Throw some kicks in, and you're
Yeah,
like, yeah, have fun with that play.
oh,
And
that's
then you can go back to whatever it was you were doing, or your to-do list, or your deadline, or your whatever it is, like you said, shifting the state of being that you're in,
mhm.
having shifted it.
Yeah, and I think that that kinda covers our next question, which had to do with, identifying hidden patterns
Mhm.
and shifting the way that we show up, and not just in relationships, and this directly speaks to that, shifting your state, getting into a creative space with yourself, no matter what that looks like, if it's air guitar or whatever, then, that's opening that doorway to allow yourself it's like, they say, and probably many people have heard this, how improv is one of the best things for speaking, right?
Mhm.
And, because you are, 1, getting out of your head,
Mhm.
you are intuitively going to the next thing and the next thing. And that is, putting yourself in flow as you speak of. And once you're in that flow, anything is possible. And it's really about finding those hidden patterns is about opening yourself up to possibility.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. And hidden patterns can be even things like seriousness,
Mhm.
over responsibility,
Yeah.
being overly focused.
Yeah.
Like, we don't see, and especially in times of stress, like, that could be our coping mechanism. That could be when our nervous system is rattled, that we go into those hidden patterns.
Yes.
Um, yeah, and I know for myself, I used to get hyper focused, and I
Mhm.
thought that was the way to get through something, is that hyper focus, and it actually limited my responses, my problem solving, and it constricted my energy. And so one way we can look at, like, what are the hidden patterns that come up when I'm feeling under pressure, when I'm under a deadline, when I'm in conflict, when I'm stressed. What are the hidden patterns that come up? Do I get, like, more serious? Do I get more responsible? Do I get more controlling? More, well, fill in the blank, right?
Right.
Whatever that
Yeah.
is for you.
Yeah.
It's like when you bring that awareness, then that introduces choice.
Yes.
Okay, I don't have to operate from that hidden pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
choose something else. I can go play the air guitar in my kitchen.
That's That's right, and recognizing the pattern, one, is really important, and also recognizing the, uh, types of conversation that is said to you from those patterns.
Yes.
It's all that limiting
Mhm.
information that you get that may not say you're not good enough specifically, yet what it's saying is you're not good enough. And so I think that that's kinda hidden in so many of our patterns.
Mhm.
And, recognizing not only the pattern itself, recognizing the dialogue that comes with it.
Yes, that's a really good point. And that's, what's coming to me to talk about as another hidden pattern is people pleasing.
Mhm.
And what can happen with that is that inner dialogue can be like, I need to make sure others feel safe and
Yeah.
comfortable. And um, whatever that inner dialogue is, like,
Mhm.
bringing your awareness to that so that you can see, if you're in those situations, what is the worst thing that's going to happen. Being able to switch that inner dialogue a little bit,
Mhm.
to just taking a step so that you can start to experiment with making your voice heard,
Yeah.
energetically showing up with more of your wisdom,
Right.
more of your truth. Because that's a big piece too, is like, we're, however you want to say this, but it's about speaking your perspective, speaking
Mhm.
your truth. Doesn't mean it's anyone else's truth. But I used to work with groups in conflict and teams in
Yes.
conflict.
Yeah.
And it's like the person that was being quiet, almost like they were holding a key that could shift the pattern in the group. And especially if that person was new and they had come
Mhm.
in and
Mhm.
they've been newly hired, it was always great to create a safe space for them to say, what is it that you're seeing here? Or
Right.
what is it that you have to add? Or what do you feel is missing? Or what do you think could be different here? You know? And not
Mhm.
as a way of setting them up, but as a way of breaking that pattern, the dynamics that were
Yes.
in that group. And we experience that in families as well, right? We
Mhm.
experience that in friendship groups.
Yeah.
And so it's wonderful to create a way so that people can, I mean, I think this is so for visionary leaders, creating a way where people in the group can start to experiment with being more of their selves, of stepping
Mhm.
outside of the hidden pattern, whether it be a group pattern or whether it be an individual pattern within someone.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, and especially, um, getting an opinion from outside, like you were speaking of, like getting the new person to feel safe enough to open up was genius because they're not in the minutia of the issues of the group
Hmm.
as much. They can see it a little clearer,
Hmm.
which I think is always really helpful. Um, and that we can do for ourselves. We can do that for ourselves, especially through creativity. It gives us that non non-attached point of view which is really interesting because it's really coming from within. And I don't mean, oh, so, you're a soul first and a human second, right? Yet we think we're the human first and the soul second.
Mm, mhm.
And so really you're having a truth conversation. And, so I love that. I hope that you enjoyed having this conversation today. It was a little bit different. We didn't talk too much about art and creativity, a little here and a little there, which I think was helpful. And, is there anything that you would like to close with?
Mm. Just an invitation for people to notice the ways in which they aren't giving themselves permission to be themselves,
Mhm.
and to bring an awareness to that inner dialogue and to question it and to find ways to show up and empower yourself to share more of yourself.
Mm.
You can start that in small ways with one person or groups of friends, but start to share your perspective, even if it's different,
Yeah.
especially if it's different, right? In a way that allows people to see more parts of yourself. Because we're back to that topic of connection, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's how to have the deepest connection with ourselves and with each other, is to be able to be aware of our hidden patterns and to choose to be connected to the truest version of ourselves.
Yes. S That's beautiful. I can't add to that, it's so nice.
Yes. So
I
it's not about doing anything, it's about being ourselves, right?
Yes,
Yeah. And
exactly.
seeing ourselves for who we truly are.
Right, doing less and just being.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
I'd like to close us with each pattern you outgrow creates space for the life your soul has been whispering about. And it's really just finding that space to listen. So thank you, Vasi.
Josette, love that. Mm.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so grateful that we had this conversation today. And for all of you listening or watching the replay, we will be back next week and we're going to have a little bit more interaction next week. I think we have two guests coming to join us. And so very excited about that. So make sure you tune in. It'll be a livelier conversation with more insight from other wise women. And so we will see you next week and have a wonderful rest of your week. I said week like 3 times. All right.